Have you ever stopped to think about how on Earth we keep track of the millions and millions of species on our planet? I mean, how can a scientist in Japan and another in Brazil be absolutely sure they're talking about the exact same tiny beetle? Well, the answer, believe it or not, goes back to one guy and a brilliant idea he had way back in the 18th century. It's a system that, to this day, shapes how we see the entire natural world. So, here's what we're going to cover. We'll start with the chaos before our guy Linnaeus came along. Then, we'll dive into his revolutionary system and how it works. We'll see how Darwin gave it a whole new layer of meaning, and finally, how modern tech is still shaping and changing this incredible tree of life.
All right, let's just paint a picture for a second. Before the 1700s, the scientific world was, to put it mildly, a bit of a free-for-all when it came to naming things. Imagine you've just discovered a new plant. The problem is, everyone you talk to has a different name for it. That was the reality.
So, yeah, how did you do it? That was the big problem. There was no universal way. A name was often local, super descriptive, and wildly inconsistent. And this wasn't just, inconvenient. It was a massive roadblock for science.
A name like Deadly Nightshade tells you something for sure, but it's not specific. Different places had different common names for the exact same species, and sometimes the same name was used for totally different species. It made talking to scientists from other countries pretty much impossible. It was pure chaos.
So, into this mess walks our hero, Carl Linnaeus. He was a Swedish botanist, a doctor, and an explorer, and he basically decided it was his life's mission to create one single standardized system to organize all of nature. And for that, he earned the nickname the Father of Taxonomy.
And Linnaeus wasn't just talking about it, he was doing it. In 1735, he published this little pamphlet called Systema Naturae, the System of Nature. But it was the 10th edition, which came out in 1758, that was the real game changer. It became the bedrock for how we name animals, even today. And just to give you a sense of the sheer scale of his work, get this. Linnaeus wasn't just designing a system, he was filling it out himself. Over his lifetime, he personally named over 12,000 species. We're talking about 4,400 animals and 7,700 plants. It was an absolutely monumental task.
So, what was this brilliant idea? It's a system called binomial nomenclature. And it sounds kind of fancy, but it is beautifully simple. Every single species gets a unique two-part name. Think of it like a first name and a last name. The first name is its genus, and the second is its specific epithet. So for us, it's Homo sapiens. For a house cat, it's Felis catus. Simple, elegant, and universal. But just giving things a two-part name was only half the solution. Linnaeus's second stroke of genius was to organize all of these species into a hierarchy, like a giant nested filing system that showed how they were all related. Let's take a look at how it works.
This is what we call taxonomic rank. The best way to think about it is like a set of Russian nesting dolls. You start with the biggest, most inclusive category. That's the domain, and you get more and more specific with each level, all the way down until you're left with just one single species.
Okay, this table shows it perfectly. Let's take us, a human and a house cat. We share the same domain, kingdom, phylum, and class. We're both eukaryotic animals with backbones that are mammals, see? But then we get to the order, and that's where we split. We're primates, they're carnivora. This system doesn't just give us a label, it actually shows us how we're related and how we're not.
Now, of course, this whole thing only works if everyone agrees to follow the rules. And they're pretty straightforward. The name has to be in Latin, so it's universal. You always italicize it. The genus gets a capital letter, but the species name doesn't. And this one is key. The first scientist to properly describe and publish a name for a new species gets dibs. That name has priority, no takebacks.
Okay, so for about a century, the Linnaean system was this amazing tool for organizing life based on what things looked like. And then, in 1859, a man named Charles Darwin came along and completely changed the game, forever.
So after Darwin published On the Origin of Species, scientists had this massive aha moment. They realized that Linnaeus, without even knowing it, had done something incredible. Those nested groups he created weren't just based on random similarities. They were a map of shared ancestry. The hierarchy was actually a family tree. Suddenly, classification wasn't just about what an organism is, but why it is the way it is.
So Darwin gave us the theory, the why.
But it was new technology that really started stretching and reshaping Linnaeus's original system. Powerful microscopes, and way later DNA sequencing, started revealing whole new worlds of life that Linnaeus couldn't have even dreamed of.
I mean, just look at this progression. Linnaeus started with 2 kingdoms, plants and animals. That's it. By the 1960s, we were up to 5 kingdoms, adding fungi, single-celled protists, and bacteria. But then, the 1990s and genetic analysis turned everything on its head. DNA showed a split in life so deep and so ancient that we had to add a whole new rank above kingdom. We call it the domain. And we found out life is really split into 3 main branches. Bacteria, archaea, which are these amazing little microbes that can live in extreme places, and eukarya, which is, well, us and every other plant, animal, and fungus.
And all of that brings us to where we are today. There's this fascinating push and pull between Linnaeus's neat, tidy ranks and our much more complex and frankly messier understanding of life as this huge branching tree.
So today, a lot of scientists use a method called cladistics right alongside the Linnaean system. While the old-school taxonomy is based on those fixed ranks and shared traits, cladistics is all about one thing: evolutionary relationships. Who descended from whom? It groups life into what it calls clades, which is just a fancy word for a common ancestor and all of its descendants.
And here's where cladistics can really shake things up. Let's talk about reptiles. In the traditional system, birds were in their own separate class, but cladistics shows us that birds actually evolved from within the dinosaur family tree, which itself is part of the reptile branch. So, if you make a group called reptiles but you leave birds out, that group is incomplete. You've included the ancestor, but not all the kids. In this new view, birds aren't just separate from reptiles, they are reptiles, a highly specialized flying branch that survived. So this all leads to a really interesting question. Linnaeus gave us this beautiful, simple system of neat boxes to put all of nature into. It served science incredibly well for almost 300 years. But now, as we get better and better at reading the genetic story of life, we see a much more complex, fluid, branching tree. So we have to ask, are these fixed ranks becoming obsolete? Is it time to move beyond the boxes? That's the big question that scientists who do this work are wrestling with right now.